Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive financial crime, breaking down the ultimate house of cards, the Ponzi scheme. We're going to completely deconstruct the psychology, the hidden structural fragility, and the exact mechanics behind how these things operate. Seriously, if you've ever found yourself wondering how incredibly smart, savvy people get sucked into these devastating traps, well, you're absolutely in the right place. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, just look at this uncompromising stance from the FBI. Ponzi schemes inevitably collapse. I mean, that really sets the stakes perfectly, doesn't it? It's not just a theory, it is a mathematical certainty. And figuring out exactly why they are doomed to collapse is exactly what we're going to unpack today. So, taking a look at this SEC's definition here, it's actually super revealing. It shows us that a Ponzi scheme isn't just a bad day at the office or an investment strategy that went sideways. No, it's a highly structured, deception-based financial crime. The absolutely critical distinction here is where the money is coming from. It's not genuine profit. It's literally just the reshuffling of new victims' cash to pay off the older ones.
All right, here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll be looking at the illusion of legitimacy, uncovering the hidden mechanics, the inevitable collapse, the wider financial crime implications, and finally, spotting the red flags.
Section 1. The illusion of legitimacy. There is this incredibly stark contrast between the promise and the reality. Promoters hook their victims with a super comforting headline promise: high returns, steady performance, little to no risk. But the devastating commercial reality, there's absolutely zero genuine trading, asset management, or lending happening at all. The money simply isn't being invested the way they claim.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth do they convince smart people to buy into this? Well, fraudsters manufacture this illusion by building a fortress of incredibly convincing but entirely fake documents. They hand you account statements showing beautiful, steady growth. They give you fabricated valuations and fake audits. They even set up false custodial arrangements and spin these highly convincing stories about having exclusive access to proprietary strategies. And here's the kicker: early investors might actually receive real payments. That brilliantly reinforces the trust, right? It makes them want to refer their friends. But those payments, they aren't investment success. They're just distributions of someone else's freshly deposited money.
Moving on to Section 2, uncovering the hidden mechanics. So let's peek behind the curtain. The fatal flaw of this entire operation is its pure cash flow dependence. It's basically a three-step cycle. Step 1, lure in new capital. Step 2, immediately divert those funds to pay returns to early investors so they stay quiet and happy. Step 3, the promoter skims a hefty chunk off the top to fund their own lavish lifestyle. You can think of it like a giant bucket with a massive hole in the bottom. The whole shebang is completely reliant on fresh money pouring in at Step 1, just to keep the illusion alive for Steps 2 and 3.
Which brings us to Section 3, the inevitable collapse.
So what actually happens when that bucket finally runs dry? Well, because there are no real profits being generated anywhere, the entire structure is fundamentally unstable from day one. Now, surprisingly, a Ponzi scheme can survive for decades. I mean, just look at Bernie Madoff, if the broader financial markets are calm and people feel wealthy. But its survival relies purely on that continuous inflow of new cash. Ultimately, it's a ticking time bomb built on a mathematical impossibility. The illusion shatters, and that inevitable crash the FBI promised, it happens the second any of these three triggers hit. Maybe the economy takes a dip and the inflow of new money slows down. Or suddenly investors need cash and redemption requests spike. Or perhaps regulators or institutions start poking around and apply scrutiny that exposes the total lack of genuine returns. The moment the promoter cannot meet a single redemption request, panic sets in and the whole facade crumbles practically overnight.
All right, Section 4, wider financial crime implications.
To keep the whole scheme running, these fraudsters deploy an overwhelming amount of complexity just to hide their tracks. We're talking moving funds through dozens of multiple accounts, utilizing affiliated entities, and setting up really complex feeder structures. They even use professional intermediaries and falsified records to mask the real source and destination of investor money. Suddenly, a relatively simple fraud snowballs into a massive money laundering and control risk nightmare. For the connected financial institutions, things like customer due diligence, transaction monitoring, and source of funds reviews become absolutely critical battlegrounds.
But you know what makes this crime even more insidious? It's how they actively bypass our personal defenses. They frequently rely on a tactic the SEC calls affinity fraud.
As the SEC notes here, affinity-based trust networks can reduce skepticism and make due diligence less rigorous. And this is crucial.
By embedding themselves into groups we already deeply trust, like our churches, our cultural communities, or our tight-knit professional circles, they brilliantly manipulate human psychology to dodge scrutiny. We naturally think, oh, they're one of us. They sit in the pew right next to me. I don't need to double-check their audits. And honestly, that is exactly what the fraudster is counting on.
Finally, Section 5, spotting the red flags. So how do we spot this house of cards before it collapses on us? Question number 1, what is the actual business model? To protect ourselves, we've got to stop looking at that shiny headline promise of high returns and start aggressively interrogating exactly how the underlying economics are supposedly working. If the promoter can't clearly explain how genuine profit is being generated in the real world, you are looking at a massive red flag. Question 2, are the assets independently held and verifiable? We can't just take the promoter's word for it, right? And we certainly shouldn't accept opaque, confusing custody arrangements. We have to demand independent verification of all assets by credible third-party institutions. So if the auditor is unheard of or the custodian is somehow affiliated with the promoter, your alarm bells should definitely be ringing. And question 3, does the pattern of cash flow actually make sense? In a financial crime framework, if we see an unexplained, perfect consistency of returns month after month, totally regardless of market conditions, or if we see customer funds flowing through unusual structures, or a business heavily reliant on new referrals, we have to take action. We need to view these not just as simple investment suitability issues, but as major, glaring indicators of large-scale deception. I'll leave you with this final thought to consider. The SEC notes that Ponzi schemes often fail simply because people finally start asking the right questions. So the next time you're presented with an exclusive, steady return investment opportunity, will you demand the hard truth about the economic reality, or will you just surrender to the illusion? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Stay sharp out there and keep asking those tough questions.